Now, you guys know I have literally no sympathy or empathy whatsoever with child sex predators, which is why this particular case blows my mind. When a teacher gets pregnant literally by a minor, we should be locking her up and throwing away the key. But this case, well, there's a completely different outcome. And as far as I'm concerned, because of that, no justice was really served. Today's case is why I do this stuff, because I like to get those cases out there that we should be really challenged over. And today's is no exception whatsoever. We're talking about Laura Whitehurst. She was a former, shall we say, 28-year-old English teacher at the time of her crime from California. She is now a registered sex offender for the rest of her life, and rightfully so. But this story is one with twists and turns, and it is unusually chilling as far as I'm concerned, mainly because it highlights the inequality when it comes down to sentencing. Because I'm going to throw it out there seems to be a massive gender bias when it comes down to female sex predators, that somehow the courts don't take their crimes quite as seriously as their male counterparts. Before we crack on with today's true crime case, just going to talk about Tester Up. That is the amazing app that you guys have been in touch with me about, because I'm getting a lot of people saying that it's worked really effectively for you. You've started to make real money just by testing apps and games. So I'm going to tell you, for those of you who are not aware, why everyone is loving it. First of all, it's super straightforward. So you sign up, you pick a task, you test apps or you complete surveys, and then you get paid literally within 24 hours. Now, the reason this works is because apps genuinely do need real people to test them. So they're essentially paying you for your time. It's 100% legitimate. And if you go ahead and check the reviews, of which there are countless, people genuinely love it. I'll put some screen recordings on the screen so you can see exactly how simple it is. And the best part, it's completely free to use. Registering takes no time at all. Payouts hit your bank within a day, and you can earn up to £80 or $80 for a single test. Plus, it is rated 4.2 stars on Trustpilot. And guess what? There's over 3 million users already signed up. Honestly, I have found this app really intuitive, really smooth to use, and there's no annoying bugs, which is a godsend. So why not give it a try? Download Tester Up today. The link's in the description, pinned comment, and you can even scan the QR code that's right here on screen. Go see for yourself how easy it is to start earning. And once you've tried it, make sure you let me know in the comments how it went for you, because I would love to hear your experiences. So let's talk about Laura Elizabeth Whitehurst as she was born. She was 28 years of age at the time of her arrest. Now, there isn't a lot of documented information on her childhood or on her upbringing, but that tends to mean there isn't anything too untoward, because we would know about that in the mitigating factors when it comes down to the actual court case. So I would imagine that she had a relatively decent experience growing up. Now, as I've said, there isn't a great deal of history regarding this particular woman when she's growing up, but she did attend Redlands High School. It's a really good school. She also graduated from Santa Barbara University, and the area that she went to school is lovely. It's basically an area of California that's nestled against the backdrop of the San Bernardino Mountains. Apparently, it's known for its deep sense of history. Apparently, it was once known as the jewel of the Inland Empire because it was this thriving hub of citrus farming. And it's also apparently known for its academic vibrancy. And apparently, the city itself has this youthful energy. I did have to look that up. I'm not au fait with the area, but it sounds nice. I guess what I'm trying to impress you all is she certainly didn't grow up in an environment where there were struggles for her. Now we get to 2006. This is at the point that she's gone through her academic experience and she's succeeded and she's managed to achieve her job as an English teacher. And that's actually, interestingly, at the high school that she attended herself. Now the reason that interests me is, first of all, no disrespect to the schools I went to, I would feel like I was having a panic attack if I walked through the doors at any point. It just does that to me, those environments. The last place I would want to go back to teach or to do anything is my schools that I attended. But I feel on a psychological level, when you take a job in the school you attended, it connects you to who you were back then. And I think that if you are a predator with predatory intentions, then that can be convenient. So you can almost pretend that you're simply still a part of the peer group as opposed to a sexual predator in disguise. Now, just to say, the school that she'd gone to herself and the school that she ends up teaching at, apparently it's one of the oldest and most recognisable schools in the area. It's got this really historic Spanish style building type to it, red tiled roofs, wide open courtyards. So people say it feels more like a small university campus than a very typical high school. Does very well academically and has a big sense of school pride. And aside from her being an English teacher at that school, apparently she served as the girls' varsity assistant soccer coach. So she's quite embedded within the extracurricular activities as well as her academic teaching. So we get to 2007 and it appears that this is when she becomes very predatory in her behaviour. It's at least where she's recorded as beginning her predatory behaviour, because of course we cannot know whether she had been involved in abusing children before this point, because victims often don't come forward, even when there is some notoriety about an individual because it's recorded in the press, for example, that they've been actually caught and charged with particular offences regarding abusing kids. That doesn't mean that victims will always feel that they want to actually come forward and tell people this happened to them. They feel embarrassed, they feel humiliated, they feel that everyone's going to know their business, they feel re-traumatised. So we can't absolutely know. It's simply that these are where the criminal charges arrive from. So we know that she was doing it in 2007. Now, it seems like she was very schooled in how to connect with young people. So her initial abuse is around a 17-year-old junior at the time. He was called Michael Cooper, and clearly she's attracted to him and she's trying to figure out ways of connecting, because it's not going to be that simple, is it, as a teacher? You're meant to be able to have a guard up professionally and you're meant to have boundaries, and if you fall short of that, people notice it. We have an expectation of the way that teachers are meant to act around pupils, and kids are really wise to these kind of scenarios when a teacher acts inappropriately. So the way that she actually creates this connection is she approaches him. They were actually looking at an English paper at the time, and this was in class, and the English paper happened to be around dreams. So she goes up to this 17-year-old young boy, essentially, that she's in charge of teaching, and she says to him, I had a dream about you. Now you can imagine a 17-year-old lad's thinking, really? What kind of dream? They're just going to be interested in that. And she says, yeah, I dreamed that we had a kiss together. Now this is completely inappropriate on every single level, but equally, it isn't something that's illegal. I mean, you're just expressing that you've had a dream and that that person was in the dream. It's a fantasy scenario that's playing out and not one in actual action base. But nonetheless, it's clever, because even though she's taking a risk, that kid could go and speak to somebody and say, I think it's really inappropriate that Miss just said this to me. The chances are he's not going to do that, because there's nothing completely outlandish about that conversation, and it's something that he might have encountered with other people in his life. But the very fact that she is doing this is because she's testing him out. His reaction will gauge her next reaction. So if he looks offended, if he looks very uncomfortable, understandably, she's probably going to think he's not going to be a kid that I can groom. Because that's what predators do. They're always testing out these things. Will this child be someone that I can push down a trajectory that works for me? Now, understandably, he was confused by this, but he was also relatively excited. He actually talked about the fact that as a hormonal teenager, it was something that caught his attention. And unbelievably, it isn't that long after this that they do end up in a situation sexually. He ends up at her home, and apparently they start having sex relatively regularly. They have sex at her home. They have sex in her classroom before school. They have sex in her car. So this is one of those relationships that, like I said, almost feels like she believes is appropriate because she's in the school where she was growing up. She's met a young man who she will see as a young adult, because this is again what predators do. He's 17. Oh, it's not too bad. He's 17. Clearly he's a minor, but nonetheless, she will do the mental gymnastics to allow her a permission base to go ahead and essentially conduct this absolute violation of trust and also sexual violation in general. And we also have to explore the fact that she's doing this in the school classroom. So she has absolutely no concern or consideration of the consequences of this. She's absolutely keyed in and honed in to this young man and what she wants from him. And that also speaks of a kind of delusion that she has within her confidence, the fact that she doesn't think he's going to talk to anybody, the fact that she doesn't think she's going to get found out. And ultimately, I suppose the biggest issue is that she doesn't see she's doing anything wrong. Child predators rarely believe they are doing anything wrong at all. They feel they're in a consenting relationship with a child, and that's what allows them and enables them to carry out this grotesque behaviour. Now, in early 2008, their relationship basically ends. It had been going on for a year. What a total disregard for professional boundaries, for the care and understanding of the impact that you'll have on a child if you literally destabilise their trust in other human beings around them. Because if you can't trust these authority figures that are meant to be there to care and protect you, who can you trust? And it also suggests that that 17-year-old young man believed that he was in some kind of consenting relationship. Now, this is very typical because young people will often believe that they are actually in a relationship that's consenting with a predator. Predators are really effective at doing that. They make the kid feel special, they buy them presents, they make them feel that they've got this intimate level that the child has never experienced before, and it kind of puts them in a prison of their own conscience where they feel that if they tell anybody about what's happening, they'll betray them and it can cause issues for the perpetrator. And so essentially, that's why often kids don't come forward, and he didn't come forward at the time. And like I said, ultimately, he probably believed that he was in a consenting relationship at that point. And later down the line, he does say that the reason that he didn't come forward at that point was because he didn't feel like a victim. Now, this is an absolutely typical response, particularly from a young man, because it can be really harrowing to actually acknowledge that you're a victim, full stop. It doesn't matter what gender you are. And also, the idea of actually going and speaking to people about this can feel pretty humiliating. Also, you'll often have enjoyed the actual sexual experiences. You won't at that point have the vision of how it's going to destabilize you going forward because you'll have felt like you were in control. It's only when you come to terms with the fact that you had no control because there was an adult who was pushing you down a trajectory you were not ready for. Only then can you start to really understand the trauma that you've endured and the impact it's going to have long term. So he doesn't say anything. And bear in mind, like I said, he likely believed he was in a committed relationship. He certainly felt that he was only seeing her. So she was seeing him, he was seeing her. There was nobody else involved. But with respect, he was wrong. She was not just seeing him. And we're not talking as if she was seeing other men. No, she was seeing other kids, because this particular type of predator isn't satisfied with one young person. They want multiple, because that's their predilection. Their predilection is to be with kids. So it also turns out that during that year relationship, she's been flirting with another student at the school. This student is only 14 years of age. Now, I understand that if you're listening to this from the UK, you will think, well, 17, okay. In the UK, it is legal after 16 years of age to have sex with people. So whether you agree with that or otherwise, in the UK, when people hear the age 16, that tends to be the age of consent. Even when you're in a situation where there is a teacher, the likelihood is that won't bring criminal charges. It will bring some kind of impact for your career. You probably lose your job, but it won't necessitate in you having a prison sentence. So for some people, when they think of a 17-year-old, they're not that offended. But let's all be real. 14 years of age? That's her interest level next? That is an abandonment on every single level. She will have been taught about safeguarding. She'll be aware that this is highly inappropriate and could definitely lead to a criminal conviction. Even though the 17-year-old will do the same, this is absolutely a massive alarm bell for any adult, because you would be aware no one is looking at a 14-year-old and thinking that they can consent in any way, shape or form. Now, this flirting doesn't take long to escalate into sexual acts, and this happens both on and off school campus. So she's having sex again in her classroom with him, in her apartment because she's taking him home. And apparently she abused him sexually between 10 and 15 times. Again, he doesn't come forward initially because, like I said, people are imprisoned by their conscience. They feel that if they go ahead and betray that person they've been having sex with, the chances are bad things will happen to them, and they don't want to be responsible for that. They also don't want to have their sexual experiences displayed for the public to see, particularly when they are young men. It's a very confusing time for an adolescent boy. And one of the reasons for this is that, of course, young men are excited by the prospect of having sex. And if a relatively attractive teacher is interested in you and seems more experienced and is offering it on a plate, then taking it might feel very appetizing. And then, of course, they feel guilty. They think that they're the individual who chased the female, because in our society we tend to talk about crime in that context. So the fact that they are a willing participant makes them feel that they have no right to actually challenge that behaviour or recognise it as criminal. Now we get to 2009, and at this point she actually gets laid off. There's budget cuts at the school, but this doesn't deter her from her career, because obviously it's giving her a whole round of opportunity when it comes down to people that she's interested in sexually. So around 2010, she gets a job teaching at Citrus Valley High School. Apparently it was a new school in the district. It only opened in August of 2009. And apparently the main emphasis of that school is to just prepare students for higher education and modern careers. It was relatively close to Redlands, so understandably it's quite convenient for her, just 3 miles apart, about a 10-minute drive from her old place of work. And again, she's working as an English teacher. She was also a club advisor at that school as well. Now in the summer of 2012, she's met another student. And again, she's going to continue this horrific sexually predatory behaviour. He was 16 years of age, and what is really just so alarming is that, bear in mind, she's got positions at this school involving extracurricular activities, and she's basically working as an advisor to him. So she is in a position of absolute core trust. He is looking to her to mentor him, to guide him, to help him, and she is thinking about how she can manipulate him into a sexual relationship. Now, apparently, the relationship started with them just spending time together. It was said that they'd hold hands at school functions, which is, again, bizarre. Because let me tell you, if any of us were watching a kid holding a hand with a teacher that wasn't related to them as a parent, for example, you would have grave misgivings about that. And you can bet your bottom dollar there'll be complaints. And so without a shadow of a doubt, people witnessing that will likely have spoken to other people in the school, and it must have reached the powers that be at some point. Other staff, even other students, would have found that situation very odd, and no doubt there were conversations that applied in the staff room about how inappropriate it was. Now, bear in mind, she's good at this. She's done it on prior 2 occasions at least, so she knows how to escalate this incrementally. And just as in the other 2 cases I've outlined, that's exactly what she does. And she basically gets him to be alone with her when they go on a school trip to Disneyland. And he ends up going back to her apartment afterwards. And they then continue to engage in both vaginal and oral sex, both on and off school campus, because like I said, she has a voracious appetite for this kind of predatory behaviour, and she's not concerned about where she has sex with these kids, as long as she has sex with them. And this relationship, again, is ongoing for almost a year. Now, bear in mind, you're a young kid. You're 16 years of age. You're with this teacher who seems so much more experienced and schooled and wise. She's already built a relationship of trust by being an advisor to you. And you feel special. You feel like she cares for you. You feel like there's a level of depth to your relationship. And hey, maybe this could be something really amazing in the long term, because you're not dealing with the nuances of relationships as you will 10 years down the line. This will feel exciting and alluring and interesting and positive for many layers of its relationship. What the child doesn't understand, however, is they're being exploited. That's going to be something they have to come to terms with down the line. Now, bear in mind, during this period of time with this 16-year-old boy, she's basically saying to him, you know what I really want to do? I want to have sex with you, but I don't want us to use any contraception. Now, what young person at 16 is going to know how to say, well, I'm not okay with that. I really think that for my own protection, and also because I don't want to have kids, I don't feel that that's going to be the route that we should take. Most young people will just be like, this person's older, this person's wiser, they're asking me for this, I should just go along with it. He could never have understood at such a young age the impact that having unprotected sex could have on his future. Bear in mind, she's 12 years older than him. She's had nearly a whole lifetime more than him. He's seeing her as this responsible adult. He trusts her decisions. He's just going to go along with it. And also, he's having sex and he's probably excited by that prospect and doesn't want to let her down or go against what she wants. And bear in mind as well, even though he's a 16-year-old boy, he's been brought up with a lot of those gender norms. Those gender norms are that a woman is the one who's basically off often led by the man. Even though that doesn't play out in lots of situations, that's the schema that a lot of young people have growing up. So he probably sees himself as having to seem like everything's okay sexually because he wants to be her equal, not her lesser. All those things are playing in. Now, he also down the line said that there were literal times that she demanded that he had to sleep with her, where he maybe wasn't necessarily in a place where he wanted to do that, and he felt like he had no option, no choice, so he consented, even though we know that legally he can't consent, but in his own mind he consented, but he consented in a very uncomfortable way, which he didn't really want to do. He just felt he had no other option than to satisfy her needs. Now, unsurprisingly, bear in mind, she's told this 16-year-old boy, you know, I don't want to use contraception, and then, remarkably, she falls pregnant. Now, when she tells this young boy that she's pregnant, she basically also tries to make out that it's a miracle, that this pregnancy has come from divine intervention, because she says that she didn't believe that she could get pregnant. Now, clearly, her saying, I didn't believe that I could get pregnant, is clearly manipulation. Why then did she say, let's not use protection? What, because she wanted to test out that theory? Where is the medical evidence that she couldn't get pregnant? Of course, there isn't any. She absolutely wanted to get pregnant. She decided he was going to get her pregnant, and she went ahead and did it. So basically, she creates this whole ruse that the child is a gift from God, and how can they not want to go through with it? Literally, this has been a design intervention from the big God themselves. She even went so far as to hand him a Bible on his 17th birthday, and she even took him to church. So she's really going in on this, and that tells you about the psychology of this particular predator, doesn't it? It tells you that in her mind, they are doing nothing wrong. In fact, like I said, this is a relationship that has been absolutely verified and validated by God himself. So that's the level of delusion that she's wandering around with. And don't get me wrong, she will absolutely know within her psyche that she is doing something utterly reprehensible as far as legally that is concerned. But that's not the way she's operating, because like I've said, these kind of predators, they don't care about the law. They think the law is wrong. They believe that their feelings are enough, and that excuses their behavior. Their egocentricity is so deep at core that they could not care less about the impact they have on their victims. And also the rules and regulations are meant to apply because of the position they have and because of the laws of the land. It does not concern them. All that concerns them are their sexual needs. But she's trying to get across to him, they've got this ultimately special connection, that she loves him, that she wants to spend the rest of her life with him, and now they have a baby together, so that's going to solidify that connection. Now, she also, during this period of being pregnant, tells the 16-year-old boy, who does turn 17 nonetheless, that she is a high-risk pregnancy. So bear in mind, he's got all of the issues to deal with, coming to terms with the fact that he's going to be a dad in a secret relationship to his teacher. He's dealing with the issues of being young, having peer situations play out in school, dealing with the pressures of learning and academic requirements that are absolutely required by the educational authority that you're within. And yet, here we are in a situation where he's going to be stressed and freaking out because she's basically saying, oh, there's a potential that something could go wrong with this pregnancy. So she literally called the high school principal at times to excuse the boy who's got her pregnant because she's been so manipulative, so that he can basically attend her checkups. Now, of course, the high school principal won't be aware that she's excusing him from class so he can accompany her to these checkups, but that's how manipulative she is. And it doesn't matter what excuse she was giving that high school principal. It's the fact that she felt that she had a right to remove him from school, to take him with her to these checkups. And it also worries me that if she was taking a 17-year-old young man to these checkups, he must have obviously looked younger. Why were those who were scanning her and checking her up not passing this information on to the authorities? At the end of the day, the authority as well that she worked for, the school itself, knew she was pregnant, by the way. They didn't know who the father was. But again, there must have been rumours going around the school. I absolutely steadfast in this belief system. There is no way you can get a teacher pregnant in school and not have a conversation with somebody. You just are going to. It's the nature of being a young person. Even when you are dealing with abusive situations, there will usually be somebody that you'll have a conversation with. It's not that that somebody is going to do anything about it, because often they don't have the resources or understanding of how to help. But often you will have some kind of conversation. And also, if their body language was so inappropriate, such as holding hands at school do's, then people are going to have some kind of instinct about this. Bear in mind, while she's pregnant, she's still sexually overt with him. She's sending him naked pictures of herself when she's pregnant. She's sending messages like, "Good night, daddy. I love you so much." So highly manipulative. Now she's calling him daddy. And can you imagine where this kid's head is? Just turned 17, got the teacher pregnant, hasn't got a clue how this is going to impact him financially, socially, future-wise, and is having to deal with this all the while trying to fit into school and get on with his work. It is just such an abandonment of her duties to have put this child in this position. Now we get to the 18th of June 2013. She does give birth. She has a little girl at a local hospital. He was there with her. He was literally present at the hospital when she gave birth. And again, what does that tell you? Surely there was some conversations when she was having the baby. Certainly, you would imagine the staff would be talking to him. They must have got a gauge that he was young. But hey, she gets away with it. She gives birth to that child. And she's obviously believing that they're going to skip off into the future holding hands together, creating this amazing family. Now, in June, around 2 weeks after the birth of her little girl, guess what? The boy's mother has finally got absolutely wise to what is playing out. And I cannot even begin to imagine the horror that she encountered when she realised that her son has fathered the baby of a teacher. At this point, rightfully and understandably, she reports her relationship to Citrus Valley High School officials. She had become really concerned after the baby had been born. She started to join the dots together, and she was genuinely afraid for her son's well-being and also for the ramifications of this if it were true. Now, once the school had been contacted, they told the police. The police then open a case immediately. The investigation begins. Now, once the police speak to this boy, he admits that yes, he had indeed had more than a year-long sexual relationship with Whitehurst. He also says that as far as he's concerned, he is the father to her child. And Redlands detectives thought to themselves, we want to have a slam dunk case here. Now, of course, you can genetically test the child DNA-wise to confirm that the child is in fact the father. But I think they wanted more than that. I think they wanted to have her incriminate herself further. So they basically organised with this young man that he's going to call her on a recorded line so that they can basically gather more evidence. Now, during that recorded phone call, let's just say she's rather forthcoming with reality. So yes, she acknowledges the ongoing sexual relationship they have. She acknowledges the birth of her child. She acknowledges the fact that he is indeed the father of that child. So of course, at this point, they have absolutely enough evidence to lead to her arrest. And we also have to think about the psychological implications for that young man to have to go ahead and do that. Bear in mind, he probably at this point feels confused beyond belief. He's going through the chaos of having had a child. He's knowing that people are very unhappy about the relationship that he's been involved in. So he'll have a level of guilt over that and a level of probably feeling that he's responsible to some degree, even though he isn't. And now he's in a situation where the person he's actually been intimate with and had a baby with is being implicated by his own actions. That is going to cause so much confusion on a psychological level. So it's the 1st of July 2013 that the police actually go over to her apartment in Redlands. They speak to her, they question her there, and it leads to her arrest at 8:45 p.m. Bear in mind, she is so convinced by this boy's loyalty and by her new perfect family unit that this comes as a massive surprise. Now, what I will give her is the fact that when she was questioned by detectives, she admitted that she had had sex with the boy numerous times. She also admitted that they began having sex in her apartment after the 2012 Disney trip. But bear in mind, at this point, they think that he is the only victim. But we know that's not true. We know that there are 2 other victims, at least. Now, after her arrest, she gets booked on suspicion of unlawful sexual intercourse with one minor. She was at this point held on a $25,000 bond, and her newborn child was then placed under the care of her parents. We get to July the 3rd, At this point, investigators have compiled very compelling evidence. They included the victim's account, the confirmation of paternity of the child. They have a lot of text messages and other vital communications between the two of them. And of course, the slam dunk reality of her own confession. So at this point, prosecutors filed 16 felony counts of unlawful sexual intercourse and oral copulation, all tied to the 16-year-old student. Within days of this breaking news, which obviously is going to shock the school community and the community at large, investigators end up interviewing other students because clearly there could be a trajectory of prior abuse. So they go ahead, look at the schools that she's worked at, and they then unbelievably discover the other two victims. So the 17-year-old and the 14-year-old from Redlands High School, they get identified at this point. They both come forward to the authorities and they do confirm to the police, yeah, my English teacher was sexually abusing me. So the boy who'd been 14 years of age in 2007, he said that she repeatedly abused him in the classroom and at her apartment. And Whitehurst again admits that she did indeed have sex with him around 10 to 15 times. Also, Michael Cooper, the first young man that we were aware she was abusing, he basically confessed everything. He said that she was the one who initiated the relationship, telling him that she'd had this dream of them kissing and took it from there. So now they're aware that this abuse stretches much further than they'd imagined. Now, Michael Cooper was 23 at the time that he comes forward. And when he spoke to the police on July the 4th, he said, she came to me first. She initiated it by telling me she had a dream where in the dream we eventually kissed. I didn't know what to think at first. It was kind of a shock. But being a hormonal 17-year-old, I just saw it as an opportunity and I just kind of went with it. I was shocked. I mean, you play with fire once. We're all people. We make mistakes. And I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Now that I find out it's happened again and there's a kid from it, I'm really worried there might be someone else, if not multiple people, between myself and this young man. So he didn't know at that point when he was speaking to the police there was actually a third victim. But he's right. He's blindsided. He thought maybe this was a one-off relationship, a student and a teacher. He was slightly older than the other young people, so he probably put it down to her just being attracted to him and breaking boundaries that she shouldn't have broke down. And then when the relationship ended, she wouldn't do it again. Now he's realizing that she had a series of abusive relationships and that she is this predator of a very high level. And that would be breathtakingly challenging to come to terms with because now he is considering himself a victim. Now, by July the 8th, this is 1 week after her arrest, she ends up posting bond and so she gets released from custody pending the trial. But bear in mind, at this point, the charges are now expanding because there are multiple victims. So it grows to 41 felony counts. Now, San Bernardino County District Attorney Michael Ramos said, students represent the future of our communities and protecting them will continue to be my #1 priority. And he argued that the bond should be increased to $750,000. And I understand why, because she is a repeat offender. Not that it would be okay if she'd abused one young person sexually, but the fact that she's abused multiple, the fact that she obviously has taken no responsibility and accountability for her actions, that means that she's dangerous. She could go on to abuse anybody else. Now, prosecutors often will ask to raise the bond in sex abuse cases if they feel that the initial bail was too low. And I would say that that initial bail does sound too low when you consider the seriousness of her crimes. Now, at this point, she was actually taken back into custody. And then July 26th, they had a bail ruling that was held at San Bernardino Superior Court. During this particular hearing, the judge denied a defense request to release her. So instead, they set a bail at $500,000. So it just indicates that they'd rethought the situation because of these new charges, and indeed they felt that it was inappropriate she be released. Now, on the 31st of July, she ends up facing court. This time is to hear the charges that she's going to be facing. Now, her defense, James R. Gass, he basically emphasized that the case involved, quote, unlawful sex crimes, but not by force. I literally want to shake my head so violently when I hear those kind of statements because what they're saying is, well, the young man was quite happy to be involved in this situation. Yes, like so many groomed children. Kids that are groomed often believe they're in an actual constructive relationship with the adult because the adult isn't violently attacking them, isn't forcing them, isn't making them feel afraid. They feel that they've bought into the relationship and they actually feel protective over their perpetrator and predator. It is so desperately confusing for them. The reality is you cannot consent when you're of a certain age that the law recognises means you cannot consent. And in these cases, that's exactly what has played out. You don't need to be forced. It is, yes, more than unlawful. It's an abandonment of somebody's roles, responsibilities, and compassion for the very people they're meant to be protecting. And actually, just because during the period of time that she was having sex with these boys, they weren't feeling under any kind of duress, does not mean the implications for their future will not be heavily impacted by her actions. They will be, because they will realise they were indeed sexually abused. And it's horrifying to recognise that you've been coerced into such situations. It makes you feel you can't trust yourself, as well as not being able to trust the wider world around you. The lawyer also said she made some big mistakes and that there are serious consequences and she's going to pay for them. Sorry, mistakes? Yeah, she made some really quite, serious mistakes. Mistakes? Yeah, mistakes. I think a serious mistake is, shall we say, bumping into somebody's car at the car park. No, it's a bit more serious than that kind of mistake. Is it a mistake where you leave the gas on? It's a little bit more serious than that. What kind of mistake are we talking about? We're talking about a massively sexually predatorial mistake. That sounds more like just a massive crime. Yeah, just go with me. We're just going to call it a mistake. It sounds far easier for people to comprehend and understand when I'm trying to get my client off when we use the words mistake. Mistake? Anyone can make a mistake. Anyone can make a mistake, can't they? That's the kind of intonation in this situation. Hey, it was just a mistake. It was a big mistake. It was a big mistake. But it was just a mistake. You, I, anybody, we could make a mistake. No, we couldn't, because we're not paedophiles, That's why we can't make those mistakes, because we don't have a predilection for children and we don't act on that predilection. That's not a mistake. It's a felony, full stop. This lawyer also went on to say she was not charged with doing anything against anyone's will or by force. So again, the suggestion there is anybody who has sex willingly, even when they're at a point in their life where they cannot consent and they're absolutely a victim, apparently that's fine. Apparently it's just a mistake that anyone could make. He also annoyingly went on to describe her as a clean-cut American girl sitting in jail. A clean-cut American girl sitting in jail. What's that? There's a clean-cut American girl sitting in jail? That's terrible. That's appalling. How can there be an all-American girl just clean-cut sitting in jail? We don't know. We're saying it's ridiculous. She shouldn't be there. What did she do? I mean, she's clean-cut. She can't have done anything wrong. She made, a bit of a mistake. She made a mistake and they put her in jail for making a mistake. Anybody can make a mistake. You should have seen the hair colour I've recently had. That was a mistake. At the end of the day, anybody can make a mistake. We are agreeing with you. What mistake did she make? Well, she basically had sex with young victims, got one of them to get her pregnant, and essentially ruined a large portion of her life. She doesn't sound like an all-American girl. She sounds like a sexual predator paedophile. Anyway, never am I surprised by the way defences go for these things. She's just an American girl sitting in jail who happens to be super clean cut, so why is she there? Let's just let her out. He also went on to say that he wouldn't refer to his client as a child predator. In fact, he said he is the only victim in the last 5 years. I don't think the term predator fits her very well. I think you'll find that if you look up the term predator, you could maybe have a picture of her just next to it, just a photograph of her, and then everyone will be able to go, yes, no, it absolutely does define her. She's 100% a predator. Also, what are we saying? Well, when it comes down to crime, the first sexual assault on a minor, that's not really a crime at all. That doesn't actually make you a predator. It's only if you do it 3, 4, 5 times that we start using those kind of terms. It's ludicrous. So you might not think the term predator fits her very well. We think it most definitely does. And when it came down to this court case, it blows my mind. Whitehurst was able to enter a negotiated guilty plea. So bear in mind, that means a plea deal has been struck. She, during this plea deal, admitted guilt to 6 felonies. That was 4 counts of unlawful sexual intercourse with a minor and 2 counts of oral copulation with a minor. In exchange for this agreement, the remaining 35 counts were dismissed. That's unbelievable. 6 times the amount, almost, of counts she was allowed to just dismiss. Melissa Rodriguez from the DA's office went ahead and accepted that 6-count plea. She basically said, the criminal justice goal is both justice and rehabilitation. Now, I will grant you, that is indeed the criminal justice goal. Justice and rehabilitation. Where's the justice? That she gets to plead to only 6 counts. She also said that the victims wanted to move on and that this resolution would allow that. Now, I get that as well. Not everyone wants to go through the horror of a court case. They get traumatised, re-traumatised, they get cross-examined. It can be very upsetting on every single level. And for young men, you can add to that potentially a layer of humiliation, that they feel that people will look at them as being perpetrators and not victims. And that's concerning for them, even though they shouldn't have that mindset. It certainly lives in the bias of their minds where they think they're going to get judged harshly because they're a boy. But the reality is, even if they want to move on with their lives, part of moving on when you've been a victim is to know that justice has been served. There's something about having credible individuals say this was wrong and it was so wrong, this person is going to suffer by having their freedom removed for a long period of time. Even though that doesn't change the trauma, even though it doesn't change what happened to you, it means that as you move forward in your life, you have a reality check where you go, yes, the reason I struggle at times is because this happened to me and it was so serious and the implications for my future were so acknowledged that they were given a sentence that represented their actions. So if she had been sentenced for all the counts that were thrown out, shall we say, because of this plea deal, we would have expected her to have been looking at 28 years in prison. And again, she's a repeat offender. She hadn't changed her ways over the years. That, to me, would make sense. But, of course, she's basically been given this plea deal. Now, bear in mind, before her sentencing goes ahead, there were a lot of questions that were being raised. So, first of all, questions about whether school officials should have reported the issues earlier, because people said there were warning signs there. They should have been very obvious. The school failed to intervene. Don't get me wrong, the district attorney's office said that apparently there was insufficient evidence to charge district personnel with failing to report, even though she was seen holding hands with one of her victims at school dues. But who am I to judge? Apparently I'm not, because I would have given a much sterner sentence than what we'll come to shortly. Now, of course, when the sentencing arrives, we're all sitting there, aren't we, with bated breath. What's going to happen here? How long is she going to get? It's going to be years, right? So August the 28th, she goes into the courtroom to receive a sentencing. She sits before Judge Art Harrison. Now, bear in mind, Judge Art Harrison said that she had grossly violated her duty as a teacher. Good. We like that. That suggests it's serious. And therefore, when it comes down to the sentence, we're expecting it to follow that trajectory, right? She was given 365 days in county jail. She was also given credit for 52 days served. She was then told she would have to be registered for 5 years on probation. She'd have to pay a restitution of $1,680 and she would have to register as a sex offender for life. Also, she had to agree to have no contact with the 3 victims. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? If we had just talked about a male sex offender in this context, he would be going away for 50 years potentially. I kid you not, we would be expecting that kind of sentencing. Certainly 28 years without a shadow of a doubt. A year? It's ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. Now, bear in mind, the DA come out and say the reason for this is they have been victim-driven considerations with a, quote, justice plus rehabilitation goal. So they're saying it avoids putting these individuals who've been victims through trial testimony about the intimate acts that were involved. But with respect, that's not how all the victims felt. So the attorney for the family of the boy who was a father to a child said, quote, this is a slap in the face to the victims. This is a very short sentence for such crimes. This is definitely being treated differently because they are boys and she is a woman. And I absolutely agree 100%. Now the boy who had actually asked Judge Harrison to reject the deal, So literally he said, I don't want this deal doesn't work for me. He said, listen, I was subject to manipulation, I was subject to countless sexual assaults, and they were brave enough to address the court. They said this: Whitehurst criminal actions against me have scarred me emotionally and will affect every relationship I have for the rest of my life. Physically, I feel sick to my stomach thinking about the manipulation I was subjected to. Physically sick that I was not the only victim. Physically sick that I am one of the very few here today putting a voice and face to the destruction Ms. Whitehurst has caused. And physically sick that Ms. Whitehurst is facing minimal consequences for her stomach-turning violations of me and other boys. He went on to say, I am sure that a male teacher who had sexual relationships with at least 3 of his students, varying in ages from 14 to 17, one of which resulted in pregnancy, would be condemned in the public eye and similarly in this court. Team went on to say, I do not know what justice is in this matter, but I do know that it is not the current plea agreement. He said, I am the father of a child when I am still myself a child. So powerful. And what the hell is going on? That you have a young man who's been through this horror speaking more sense than the DA prosecutor and the court itself. That is ludicrous. And also his mother spoke in court. Now, she didn't personally speak. Somebody came and represented her, and it was another family member. And what was said was Whitehurst was a child predator. And it also noted that her son had been bullied and teased as a result of the case. She actually said, Whitehurst actively pursued my son. She robbed him of his innocence and youth. No teacher should think it's okay to have sex with a student. And she's absolutely right. I mean, that is the core minimal we should be able to expect, isn't it? That a teacher should not be interested sexually in a student. And even if a student and a teacher have some kind of flirtatious behaviour, which is highly inappropriate, it should never go past that. And even that should be challenged professionally. Now we get to January the 5th of 2014. It's unbelievable because she gets released after serving 6 months. After serving 6 months for violating 3 young people's lives. That's what this sexual predator received. Now, apparently this is due for 2 reasons. In California, county jail inmates often receive, quote, good conduct credits. So that basically reduces their sentence if they follow rules, if they participate in work or educational programs. If you're a highly manipulative predator, you're going to do that, aren't you? Anything that's going to reduce your sentence. That goes absolutely in line with somebody who's highly manipulative. That doesn't mean that she's rehabilitated. It just means she's seen a get out of jail free card and taken it very effectively. Another reasoning behind this was because in San Bernardino County, in the jail, it faced significant overcrowding issues, so they let her go. So at this point, she ends up beginning her 5-year probation, wearing a GPS tag, and under the terms of that, if she violates the probation, she could apparently spend more than 6 years in prison. I would have hoped that she would have violated, because that would give at least a little bit of justice to those poor victims who basically saw her get off scot-free for the most predatory behaviour beyond belief. Now we get to February the 4th, 2014. This is when the victim, who was the father to her child, he goes ahead and files a lawsuit against Redlands Unified School District and Citrus Valley High School. So the lawsuit itself alleged that the district administrators knew, or should have at least known, of Whitehurst's misconduct, and that they failed to report and they failed to protect the students because of that. And he also noted a police search warrant allegation that the district waited 6 weeks before actually notifying the police that they were aware of the abuse that had happened. So this is due to the fact that the administrators had literally received concerns about Whitehurst's relationship with the 16-year-old student weeks before his mother had made reports, which is harrowing beyond belief. They were aware of this and they did nothing. So instead of immediately reporting the suspected abuse to law enforcement, which is 100% legally required by California's mandatory reporting laws for educators, the district did wait about 6 weeks before finally contacting the police, which is ludicrous. I appreciate that the school is sitting there thinking, oh, do we want the reputational damage? But it is reprehensible and a complete failure to protect young people in their educational establishment. Now, of course, the district were like, no, we didn't get involved in any kind of cover up. They said that the first credible report was when his mother came forward. So their excuse is, oh, there were all these other reports of people saying that things were untoward that were happening. But we were like, well, we really need a credible report. What's a credible report? Well, only when somebody directly involved in the child's life and family come forward. I mean, who makes that rule? Nobody. If somebody has a suspicion, the suspicion should be investigated. But of course, they're going to deny everything. We see this play out with agencies and big establishments and authorities all the time. Now, on August 18th, 2016, Redlands Unified School District, they settled a $6 million payout. And we all know that means. It means that they're not going to say, we did get it all wrong, we did know about this, we recognised there was a predator and we did nothing to protect the kids. They're basically saying we're admitting nothing, but here you are, have $6 million. And don't get me wrong, for the individuals who receive that money, that can be a life-changing amount of cash to receive, but it doesn't make up for the horror they've endured and the status that they feel as a victim as they travel through their life, not being able to trust relationships anymore because they're afraid that people will use them and they're afraid of the vulnerabilities that lie within their nature. This is something that is really challenging, and whilst money can make life easier, it doesn't heal trauma. Let's just hope that they use some of the money to actually get the help they absolutely deserve in this case. Now, in 2021, the victim, who was 14 years old during the 2007 to 2008 situation, they actually went ahead and filed for a separate lawsuit. Now, this lawsuit was again similar to the previous one, and that alleged that Redlands Unified failed to protect him, even though the teacher should absolutely have been aware of the warning signs. And it claimed that administrators and teachers either knew or should absolutely have known about Whitehurst's inappropriate conduct, and by not acting, the district basically allowed the abuse to continue. Now, by September 2023, that lawsuit was also settled with a $2,250,000 payout from RUSD. They, again, wanted to resolve the case without going to trial. So RUSD said the settlement was in the best interest of the district and community, but they went ahead and said, we don't admit any wrongdoing. Everyone, of course, knows it's an absolute admission of wrongdoing, because why would any authority pay out $8.25 million in two cases unless 100% they knew that they were going to get absolutely vilified for non-action if an investigation had actually come to light in the press and they'd had to go to court and been found that they'd been highly inappropriate in their actions. Now, after, of course, this all came out in the press, in spite of them settling and saying that they weren't really admitting guilt, it became a national storm. So they had to come out and speak about what they were going to do to change this ever happening again. So they came out and said, we've implemented several protocols, some of which are unique and hopefully become industry standard across public education. They said these protocols have been implemented with input from multiple sources, including a nationally recognised authority on child sexual abuse and prevention techniques. They said we will continue to regularly assess our policies, systems and protocols and adjust accordingly. They said we are always open to constructive criticism, as no system can ever be deemed perfect, although with respect, the fact that you never admitted that you were guilty and just settled to avoid that suggests that you've not necessarily taken any constructive criticism, because you've just tried to say, nothing to see here, we're just paying an enormous amount of money to these individuals because you know it's best for the rest of the community. I mean, that's a pile of BS, isn't it? So one of the protocols actually refers to Act Now, and ACT basically stands for Actions Create Trust. They adapted that in 2018. Whether that's going to have any impact, no one knows. Now, 3 years later, the San Bernardino County Civil Grand Jury actually followed up to investigate how effectively the program was being implemented, but apparently they were unsatisfied with what they found. That was in 2021. They were also unsatisfied with what they found in 2022. They said training and top-down communication needed significant improvement and that staff need a clearer understanding of how and to whom to report. It's ludicrous if you don't know how to report it. Just go and speak to the person who's the principal. Secondly, if they do nothing, speak to the police. In fact, do both, because then you'll definitely get some action. And it turned out that more than $41, let that sink in, more than $41 has been paid out in lawsuits by former students from RUSD, stemming from allegations of sexual abuse occurring between 1999 and 2016, and there's been more since. Now, CBS, they reported saying that 50 students have accused 25 plus teachers of misconduct between 1999 and 2022. That's more teachers than years have passed, which is appalling. And what is clear is that even today, since this crime was committed, people express the concern and the outrage about the bloody criminal sentence that was given, bearing in mind the level of the offences I've covered today. Because the reality is, it shows that justice wasn't served for these victims. A lot of people have said that the lawsuits actually reflect the ongoing failure and the negligence of the district itself, but nothing deters from the fact that the true individual predator here is Whitehurst. She's the one who's guilty of everything that we've talked about. She's the perpetrator, she's the paedophile, she's the sexual predator, and for some reason, she got away with 6 months in prison. 6 months in prison. And that leaves the most important question, doesn't it? What if this had been a man? Because I guarantee it would have been a wholly different sentence. And that's because of that gender bias. So somehow, because she's a female, somehow, because she looks a certain way, how could she truly be harmful? In spite of her very victims coming forward and saying, well, she has been harmful. Not just in the actual experience of having sex with them at the time, but in their life in general and ongoing into their future. A future that she has stained, a future that she has fractured. Now, I don't know about Whitehurst's personal life. Now, I did do some digging. I've tried to find out. But one of the things that I have discovered, in spite of the limited information and access, is that she actually has shared custody of her child with the father. And I find that really distressing, because imagine being a female and you've been raped by a perpetrator, albeit you might have been groomed and coerced into believing you're in a relationship with them. You have a baby, they go to prison, and then once they're out of prison, they're allowed access to your child. This does happen. I think it's a blight and a stain on humanity. It's disgusting, it's disgraceful, it shouldn't happen. I don't think that child should be anywhere near a sexual predator. I really don't. It blows my mind that she's enabled any access, particularly as she's had to sign the sex offenders register for the rest of her life. She shouldn't be within 100 feet of a kid. But this is a situation that seems to be playing out. How that young man must feel having any contact with her, even if that's just through the experience of sharing a child, even if he doesn't see her, that's something that's going to have massive ramifications for him moving forward. And it's like re-traumatizing that person every single time he has any kind of contact with her. Like I said, even if that's vicariously through the child, the fact is she is involved still in his life because of that. And I think that's diabolical. What do you think, guys? Do you think I'm being overzealous in my belief systems? Do you think she could have been rehabilitated? Do you think she is or isn't a threat anymore? Or are you horrified that this is playing out where she still has access to a child that she basically forced another child to have with her, and that therefore the victim is going to be traumatized again and again and again through the ages? Surely that's ludicrous. Or am I, as ever, being a little bit too judgmental? Let me know your thoughts. Appalling sentence. A guy would never have got that. Don't get me wrong. In the UK, right now, we have sex offenders who are getting ludicrously low sentences. It's disgusting. But that says something about our judiciary. In the States, you tend to get a far more aggressive outcome with these cases, and rightfully so. But yet again, here we are with a female sex predator getting off unbelievably lightly. Look after yourselves, guys. See you again next time. Be safe.